Hi, Mathilde from Ditmars, researcher in the 𝘱𝘭𝘢𝘺 project. And I'm talking here today with my colleague Marcello Natili, assistant professor at the University of Milan and also researcher in the 𝘱𝘭𝘢 project. He's a researcher in comparative social policy and has recently co-authored a book called Social Policy and EU Polity Building Through Crisis and Beyond. In this book, Marcello, you argue that the EU experienced social crisis with severe social and political consequences. Can you tell me a bit about what we consider the social crisis of the European Union?
We define the social crisis as the accumulation of social problems and the growing commodification of life in the European Union. Now, as you know very well, we collected a number of indicators to describe this pattern, but I can make a very simple example. Throughout Europe, over the last 3 decades, we observe an increasing employment rate. So actually people work more everywhere. At the same time, if you look at the indicators, such as indicators of poverty, of material deprivation, we do not observe any improvement. So to put it very simple, we work more, but at the same time, social conditions do not improve. Now, this is what we call the social crisis, and it is a crisis by erosion. What do we mean? We mean that it is a different crisis compared to the other one that have been widely studied, in particularly by our solid colleagues, such as the COVID crisis, the Euro crisis, the refugee crisis, as it gradually unfolds through times, through decades, so it is less visible. It tends to have a lower political visibility. A second key characteristic, key feature of this crisis is that it tends to have asymmetric consequences, meaning that it is happening everywhere in Europe, but it is much more visible in the peripheries, and particularly in Southern Europe. Third key characteristic, Europe is a driver rather than a response to the social crisis, meaning that the European constitutional asymmetry, the primacy of market over social goals, and the Maastricht rules kind of contributed to the unfolding of the social crisis. As you also know, we have collected a number of public opinion data, and these data show that the majority of European citizens are quite aware of the existence and perceive this social crisis, this accumulation of social problems. These imply, and actually this is what our research shows very clearly, is that this crisis has not only social consequences, but it has severe political consequences. The weaknesses of the social dimension of the European Union is one of the key drivers of contestation and of the increasing politicization of the European Union.
How did the EU respond to this crisis?
Well, Mathilde, to be true, the very notion of the social crisis of Europe was very contested at the European level. Some political actors, trade unionists, and also some members of the Barroso Commission tried to frame the consequences of the Euro crisis in terms of a social crisis. But they were actually a minority, and the main responses to the Euro crisis actually relied on a conservative political agenda, and austerity was the main game in town. Obviously, these had relevant social and political consequences, and it changed the political landscape. Some trade unionists, progressive political parties, civil society organizations tried to put new proposals on the table. What is particularly important is also that the European Commission, as well as some very important conservative leaders in some national governments, try to start to realize that the social dimension was particularly important to re-enhance the legitimacy of the European integration process. Political events followed. With the Juncker Commission, the European Pillar of Social Rights was launched. And after this very important decision, especially at the discursive level, some new regulatory intervention in the social domain were launched. In particular, the Working Life Balance Directive and also the Posted Worker Directive. And most importantly, at least in my view, the Directive on Adequate Minimum Wage. Which is very important because it breaks some old taboos in the European Union level, such as the importance of strengthening wages and the collective bargaining process. And other important decisions followed, such as the Directive on Platform Workers. Now, if this this increased intervention in the regulatory realm are important, of course, what I think it's more innovative in this phase, it is the introduction of new funds, new social policy funds, through which the European Union not intervened directly in the social sphere, but actually helped stress the national welfare state to pursue social goals that otherwise it would struggle to accomplish by themselves. The European Union, through funds such as the Youth Guarantee, the Social Climate Fund, the Just Transition Fund, and most importantly during the COVID crisis, the Recovery and Resilience Fund, and 𝘱𝘭𝘢𝘺, start to intervene as a sort of social shield, not intervening directly, but again, supporting stressed member states. I would say that strengthening social regulation and the introduction of new funds can be characterized without any doubt as a sort of expansion of EU social intervention.
And do you think these responses have helped the EU to come out of this crisis?
Well, this is a very difficult response to answer right now, and it is a bit too early to say, I would say. At the same time, I think that there are some drawbacks of this intervention. Either the permanent interventions, such as the reinforced youth guarantee, the social climate fund, they tend to be limited in the scope or to be severely underfinanced to respond to the challenges they want to face. The more broadening and encompassing instrument, the Recovery and Resilience Fund, or 𝘱𝘭𝘢, they are only temporary. So they do not provide for that kind of institutionalization of a response to the social crisis that we were talking about at the very beginning of this conversation. I would say that this provides some very relevant institutional seeds, but to provide a fully fledged response, they need to be acted upon politically. They need political actors right now to engage with this response and try to institutionalize them. Do I see that coming in the next future? Well, I have to admit that the political landscape nowadays looks a little bit darker compared to 5 years ago. We know very well that in the 2024 political election, parliamentary election, sovereignist force gained traction. They obtain very good results. And we know our research kind of points that these are the political forces that kind of were more systematically against the advancement in the social dimension of the European Union that I just mentioned. So this is a negative political event because it highlights how the political conditions are not really there. A second element that has to be taken into consideration is that one of our research clearly showed that a crucial precondition for advancement in the social dimension is that progressive forces, trade unions, the European trade union movement has to overcome territorial differences. And there are and this is not always the case, and I have to cite one element that points in the opposite direction that is very relevant and that it constitutes a very severe, in my view, drawback in the project of constructing a more social Europe. Nowadays, as you probably know, the Danish Social Democratic government has filed an initiative against the European Minimum Wage Directive. Now, these highlight how this kind of territorial unit within the progressive force is not there. If this legal complaint will have positive result, this will be a major breach in the project to construct a more socially oriented European Union. Finally, we know very well that the geopolitical condition has completely changed nowadays. And we can observe that the current priority of the von der Leyen II Commission is increasing spending for defense. Now, we know very well that they are not necessarily an alternative. You can spend for increasing defense and the social strengthening the social dimension of the European Union. But this is not what is happening. It looks like the social programs that need to be reinforced actually are completely absent from the program of the current von der Leyen Commission. And this trajectory is very dangerous. If one thing our research in the SOLID projects highlight that forgetting about the social dimension and the importance to respond to the social crisis risk put the European integration process into danger, as political reaction are very likely to follow, and a new crisis of legitimization might happen in the foreseeable future.
Marcello, thank you so much for sharing with us your insights about the social crisis and how the EU responded to it. We would like to know what you think about how the EU tackled the social crisis. If you want to explore more insights from our research, please visit the Solid Blue Sky social media profile or the Solid website, where you can have access to all our publications that are in open access. You can also find the recently published book by Marcello and co-authors from the Solid team entitled Social Policy and EU Polity Building Through Crisis and Beyond. Thank you.